Every society, at some point in history, faces a moment when reality becomes distorted. Collective delusion takes over, and what was once clear becomes murky. In such times, it's not the external world alone that changes. People's minds change, realities shift. The mass psychosis takes root, and before we know it, entire populations are living in a kind of madness where truth is no longer what it once was. The question is, how do a select few manage to see through this? How is it that, in the face of overwhelming delusion, just 1% of people, philosophers, poets, thinkers, can navigate this mental labyrinth with clarity? What do they know that the rest of us don't? Fernando Pessoa, the Portuguese poet and philosopher, offers us a profound insight into this question. Pessoa understood something fundamental about the human mind, something that allows one to escape mass delusion, not by fighting it directly, but by mastering a subtle shift in perspective. His secret lies in a form of detachment that is not indifference, but a deep internal freedom. It's about understanding the very nature of reality and illusion, and knowing exactly when and how to disengage from the collective madness around you. Think about it: when mass psychosis takes hold, it's not just that people believe falsehoods. It's that the entire structure of thought becomes diseased. People start to accept contradictions, to embrace irrationality as if it were a higher form of truth. And in doing so, they lose themselves. They become part of a collective mind that no longer functions rationally. But how do you protect yourself from this? How do you maintain your sanity when everyone around you seems to be losing theirs? This is where Pessoa's insight becomes crucial.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Pessoa wrote under multiple heteronyms, different personas, each with their own worldview. At first glance, this might seem like a literary game, but it's much more than that. By creating different selves, Pessoa was cultivating a form of mental flexibility that allowed him to navigate different perspectives without becoming trapped in any one of them. This is the key to mastering mass psychosis: the ability to recognize that no single perspective is absolute, and to shift between perspectives without losing yourself in any of them. This mental agility is what allows one to see through the collective delusions that take hold during times of mass psychosis. You see, when a society descends into madness, it's not just that people believe in lies. It's that they become emotionally attached to those lies. They build their identities around them. To challenge their beliefs is to challenge their very sense of self. This is why mass psychosis is so difficult to break from the outside. When you try to show people the truth, they don't see it as a liberation. They see it as a threat. This is why the 1%, those who can see through the psychosis, must first master the art of detachment. They must learn to observe the collective madness without becoming emotionally entangled in it. Pessoa's secret lies in his ability to create distance between himself and the world. But this is not the same as apathy. It's a form of intellectual and emotional freedom that allows one to engage with the world without becoming trapped by it. This is what separates the 1% from the masses. While the masses are swept up in the emotional currents of fear, anger, and groupthink, the 1% remain grounded in their own internal reality. They understand that reality, as most people experience it, is a construct of fragile web of beliefs, assumptions, and emotions that can easily be manipulated. And more importantly, they understand that this web can be escaped. Let's take a moment to consider the nature of reality itself. Most people assume that what they see, hear, and perceive is real. But is it? How much of what we call reality is simply a projection of our own minds? Pessoa understood that reality is not fixed. It is fluid, shaped by our perceptions, our thoughts, and our emotions. In times of mass psychosis, this fluidity becomes dangerous because the collective mind shapes reality in irrational and destructive ways. But the 1%, those who master Pessoa's secret, understand that this same fluidity can be used to their advantage. They can shape their own reality independent of the collective delusion. This is not about escaping into fantasy. It's about realizing that your mind, your thoughts, and your perceptions are your own. They do not belong to society, to the media, or to any external authority. When you fully internalize this, you become immune to the collective madness. You see through the illusions not because you've discovered some hidden truth, but because you've realized that truth itself is a construct. This is the paradox at the heart of Pessoa's philosophy. To free yourself from the delusions of the masses, you must first recognize that all truths are, in some sense, illusions. Now, this might sound nihilistic, but it's not. It's liberating. When you realize that reality is not fixed, you gain the power to create your own reality. You are no longer bound by the collective delusions that plague society. You become a master of your own mind, and in doing so, you gain the ability to navigate the world with a clarity and freedom that few others possess. This, ultimately, is what allows the 1% to master mass psychosis. They are not swayed by the emotional currents of the masses because they've learned to detach from the very concept of truth as a fixed, external reality. The question, then, is how do we cultivate this detachment? How do we, like Pessoa, learn to shift between perspectives without losing ourselves in any of them? The answer lies in a practice that Pessoa embodied throughout his life: the cultivation of multiple selves. By creating different personas, each with their own worldview, Pessoa was able to see the world from multiple angles. This allowed him to escape the trap of rigid thinking, to remain fluid and adaptable in the face of changing circumstances. We can do the same. We may not need to create elaborate personas like Pessoa did, but we can practice the art of shifting perspectives. We can learn to see the world from different angles, to question our own assumptions, and to recognize that no single worldview is absolute. This mental flexibility is what protects us from the rigid thinking that leads to mass psychosis. It allows us to engage with the world without becoming trapped by it, to observe the collective madness without being consumed by it. But this is not just a philosophical exercise. It has practical implications for how we live our lives. In times of mass psychosis, when the world seems to be losing its mind, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel like there's nothing you can do to change the situation. But when you master Pessoa's secret, you realize that you don't need to change the world. You only need to change your relationship to it. You don't need to fight the collective delusion head-on. You simply need to step outside of it. This is what gives the 1% their power. They are not bound by the same rules as everyone else. They do not live in the same mental world as the masses. They have freed themselves from the collective psychosis by realizing that reality is not something that happens to them. It is something they create. And once you realize this, you gain a kind of invincibility. The world may descend into madness, but you remain grounded in your own internal reality, free from the delusions that ensnare others. At this point, you might be wondering, how do we apply this in our daily lives? How do we, like the 1%, remain free from the collective psychosis that grips society? The answer is simple, yet profound. It begins with a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing yourself as a passive recipient of reality, begin to see yourself as an active creator of it. Recognize that your thoughts, your perceptions, and your emotions are your own. They do not belong to society, to the media, or to any external authority. When you fully internalize this, you become immune to the collective madness. But this is not something that happens overnight. It requires practice. It requires constant vigilance over your own mind. You must learn to question your own assumptions, to challenge your own beliefs, and to remain fluid in your thinking. This is the essence of Pessoa's secret. It's not about discovering some hidden truth. It's about realizing that truth itself is a construct, and that you have the power to shape it. Mental freedom is not the rigid adherence to a particular way of thinking, nor is it the stubborn refusal to engage with the world. Instead, it is the capacity to flow between perspectives, to engage deeply with reality, while also understanding that reality is, in many ways, a creation of the mind. For the 1% who have mastered this, the world is not a fixed entity. It is alive, malleable, and subject to interpretation. This flexibility is what gives them the strength to remain untouched by the collective madness that grips society during times of mass psychosis. Fernando Pessoa's secret lies in this very fluidity. He understood that identity, like reality, is not a fixed construct. We are not bound by one self, one truth, or one way of being. Pessoa famously wrote under multiple heteronyms, each with its own distinct personality, worldview, and even writing style. By doing this, he was able to explore different aspects of existence without being trapped by any one of them. This created a kind of internal freedom that is rare and powerful, a freedom that allows one to navigate the world's contradictions without becoming ensnared by them. How, then, can you cultivate this kind of fluidity? How can you, like Pessoa, learn to shift between perspectives without losing yourself in any of them? The first step is to recognize that your sense of self, like your perception of reality, is not fixed. You are not a single, unchanging entity. You are a complex being, capable of adopting multiple viewpoints, multiple ways of thinking, and multiple modes of existence. This doesn't mean that you are inauthentic or that you lack a core identity. It means that your identity is flexible, adaptable, and capable of growth. In times of mass psychosis, when society is gripped by collective delusion, this flexibility becomes a tool of survival. The masses, trapped in rigid ways of thinking, become emotionally and intellectually invested in a particular worldview. They are unable to see beyond the narrow confines of their beliefs, and as a result, they are easily manipulated. But the 1%, those who have developed the fluidity of mind that Pessoa exemplified, are able to see beyond the delusion. They can step outside the collective madness and observe it without becoming consumed by it. This ability to step outside of the collective delusion is crucial. During times of mass psychosis, the pressures to conform are immense. The media, the government, and even your friends and family may be caught up in the delusion, and they will expect you to share their beliefs. But the 1% understand that conformity is often a sign of mental enslavement. To conform to a society that has lost its grip on reality is to lose your own sense of self. This is why Pessoa's secret is so powerful. It allows you to maintain your individuality, even when everyone around you is losing theirs. But how do you maintain this individuality without becoming isolated or disconnected from the world? This is where many people struggle. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, in order to remain free from the collective delusion, you must withdraw from society altogether. But this is not the way of the 1%. The key is not to isolate yourself from the world, but to engage with it on your own terms. You can interact with society, participate in its rituals, and engage with its ideas, but you do so from a place of internal freedom. You are not bound by the same emotional and intellectual constraints as the masses, because you understand that reality is not fixed. This brings us to an important point. The 1% are not indifferent to the world. They are not apathetic or detached in the way that many people assume. In fact, they are often deeply engaged with the world, but their engagement comes from a place of clarity and freedom. They are able to see the world for what it is, both its beauty and its madness, without becoming trapped by its illusions. This is the essence of Pessoa's secret, the ability to live fully in the world without being bound by it. At this point, you may be wondering how you can cultivate this kind of mental freedom in your own life. The answer lies in developing a practice of internal reflection and perspective shifting. You must learn to question your own assumptions, to challenge your own beliefs, and to remain open to new ways of thinking. This doesn't mean that you abandon all of your beliefs or that you become a passive observer of life. It means that you cultivate a kind of intellectual humility, a recognition that no single perspective is absolute and that reality is always more complex than it appears. One practical way to do this is to regularly engage with ideas that challenge your worldview. Read books, listen to talks, and have conversations with people who see the world differently than you do. But don't engage with these ideas defensively. Instead, approach them with curiosity and openness. Allow yourself to entertain different perspectives without feeling the need to adopt them as your own. This is the practice of mental flexibility that Pessoa mastered, and it is what allows the 1% to remain free from the collective delusion. Another important practice is the cultivation of emotional detachment. This doesn't mean that you suppress your emotions or that you become emotionally numb. It means that you learn to observe your emotions without becoming controlled by them. During times of mass psychosis, the collective emotions of fear, anger, and hysteria can be overwhelming. But the 1% are able to remain calm and centered because they have developed the ability to observe their emotions without being swept away by them. Pessoa's secret is, in many ways, a form of emotional and intellectual self-discipline. It requires you to develop a strong internal foundation, a sense of self that is not dependent on external validation or approval. This is what allows the 1% to remain free from the collective madness that grips society during times of mass psychosis. They are not swayed by the emotional currents of the masses because they have developed a deep sense of internal stability. But this internal stability is not something that can be achieved overnight. It requires consistent practice and self-awareness. You must learn to recognize when you are being influenced by external forces, whether it's the media, the opinions of others, or the emotional climate of society, and to detach from those influences. This doesn't mean that you ignore what's happening in the world. It means that you engage with the world from a place of internal freedom, rather than from a place of emotional or intellectual dependence. The 1% understand that true freedom is not about escaping the world. It's about mastering your relationship to it. This is the essence of Pessoa's secret. It's not about retreating into some isolated, intellectual ivory tower. It's about engaging with the world in a way that is free from the delusions that trap others. It's about seeing the world clearly, without the distortions of fear, anger, or ideological rigidity. In times of mass psychosis, when the world seems to be losing its mind, this kind of clarity is rare and valuable. But it is also achievable. By cultivating the practices of mental flexibility, emotional detachment, and internal stability, you can join the ranks of the 1%, those who have mastered the art of staying sane in a world gone mad. This brings us to a final, crucial point. The 1% are not passive observers of the world's madness. They are active participants in shaping a new reality. By refusing to be trapped by the collective delusions of society, they create the space for new possibilities, new ways of thinking, and new ways of being. This is the ultimate power of Pessoa's secret. It not only allows you to escape the madness of the masses, but it gives you the tools to create something new, something more aligned with your own truth. The 1% are not merely survivors of mass psychosis. They are creators of a new mental and emotional reality. And this, ultimately, is the most profound aspect of Pessoa's secret. It's not just about escaping the delusions of the world. It's about using your freedom to craft a new way of living, thinking, and engaging with the world around you. Mental freedom is not a passive state of mind, it is a dynamic force. Once you've liberated yourself from the collective psychosis, the question becomes, what do you do with this freedom? The answer lies in the realization that freedom is not just about being unbound from the illusions of others, but about gaining the power to shape reality according to your own truth. This is where the 1%, those who have mastered Pessoa's secret, truly stand apart. They are not merely free from the madness of the world, they are creators of a new world. Fernando Pessoa understood that freedom is not just a negation of control. It is also the ability to construct and reconstruct reality. This is why he wrote under multiple heteronyms, each one representing a different facet of existence, a different perspective on life. By doing this, Pessoa was not only freeing himself from the limitations of any singular identity or worldview, but he was actively creating new realities. Each heteronym was a new world, a new way of seeing and interacting with life. The 1% understand this same principle. They realize that when you free yourself from the collective delusions of society, you gain the power to start creating your own reality. This is not about imposing your will on others or trying to manipulate the external world in a forceful way. It is about cultivating an internal sense of sovereignty, a mastery over your own mind, emotions, and perceptions. With this mastery comes the power to shape how you experience the world and ultimately how you engage with it. There is immense power in understanding that the world as we perceive it is largely a construct. The collective psychosis that grips society during times of mass delusion is a testament to this. People don't just lose touch with reality, they start to participate in the creation of a false reality, a shared delusion that takes on a life of its own. But if false realities can be created on such a massive scale, then true, authentic realities can also be created by individuals who have freed themselves from these collective delusions. The 1% are able to do this because they have mastered the art of perspective shifting. They understand, as Pessoa did, that reality is not fixed, it is fluid, shaped by our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. This doesn't mean that there is no objective reality, but it means that our experience of reality is always mediated by our internal state. When you control your internal state, you gain a certain mastery over your experience of reality. This is the philosopher's weapon, the ability to shape your own mind, and by extension, to shape your own world. But this power comes with responsibility. To shape reality is not to escape into fantasy or delusion. It is to engage with the world in a deeper, more intentional way. The 1% don't retreat from reality, they engage with it on their own terms. They are not swayed by the emotional currents of fear, anger, or hysteria that often accompany mass psychosis. Instead, they remain clear-headed, grounded in their own internal truth. This allows them to see opportunities where others see only chaos, to find meaning where others find only confusion. Consider this during times of mass psychosis. When society is gripped by collective madness, most people are reacting out of fear. Their thoughts, actions, and decisions are driven by anxiety, confusion, and a desperate need for security. But the 1%, those who have mastered Pessoa's secret, understand that fear is a distortion of reality. They see beyond the fear, beyond the collective delusion, and they are able to act from a place of clarity and purpose. This is what gives them the power to shape reality rather than being shaped by it. But how exactly do they do this? How do the 1% harness their mental freedom to actively shape reality rather than merely reacting to it? The answer lies in their ability to focus their attention. Attention is one of the most powerful tools we have for shaping reality. What you focus on becomes your reality. When you focus on fear, chaos, and confusion, those things become magnified in your mind. But when you focus on clarity, purpose, and creativity, you begin to shape a different kind of reality, one that is rooted in your own truth, rather than in the collective delusion. The 1% understand the power of attention, and they use it consciously. They are aware that the world is constantly vying for their attention through the media, through social pressures, through the collective emotions of society. But they do not let their attention be hijacked. Instead, they direct it intentionally, focusing on what is important to them, on what aligns with their own internal truth. This is how they create a reality that is not dictated by the external world, but by their own internal state. This is a crucial point. Reality, as we experience it, is largely a reflection of where we place our attention. When you focus on the chaos of the world, when you allow yourself to be swept up in the collective psychosis, you are giving your attention and therefore your power away. But when you focus on your own internal clarity, on your own creative potential, you are reclaiming your power. You are shaping your reality from the inside out, rather than letting the external world shape you. This is why the 1% are able to remain free, even in the midst of mass psychosis. They understand that true freedom is not about escaping the external world, but about mastering their internal world. They know that reality is not something that happens to them, it is something they actively participate in creating. And this creation begins with the mind, with the ability to focus their attention, to direct their thoughts, and to cultivate a sense of internal sovereignty. But this internal sovereignty is not about isolation. It is not about retreating into a purely subjective world. The 1% are deeply engaged with the world, but they engage with it from a place of internal freedom. They are not bound by the same emotional and intellectual constraints as the masses because they have learned to shape their own reality. This is the true power of Pessoa's secret. It allows you to remain fully present in the world, fully engaged with life, while also maintaining a sense of internal detachment and freedom. So how can you apply this in your own life? How can you, like the 1%, begin to shape your reality rather than being shaped by the collective madness of society? The first step is to reclaim your attention. Pay close attention to where your focus is going throughout the day. Are you constantly reacting to the news, to social media, to the emotions of those around you? Or are you directing your attention consciously, focusing on what is important to you, on what aligns with your own truth? This is not an easy practice, especially in a world that is constantly vying for your attention. but it is essential if you want to remain free from the collective delusion. The more you can direct your attention consciously, the more you will begin to shape your own reality. And as you do this, you will find that the external world begins to reflect your internal state. This is the philosopher's weapon in action, the ability to shape reality by mastering your own mind. But attention is just the beginning. The 1% also understand the importance of intention. It's not enough to simply focus your attention, you must also have a clear sense of what you want to create. What kind of reality do you want to shape? What kind of life do you want to live? These are not abstract questions, they are the foundation of your ability to shape reality. Without a clear intention, your attention will be scattered, and you will be more easily influenced by the collective emotions of society. This is why the 1% are so powerful during times of mass psychosis. While the masses are reacting out of fear and confusion, the 1% are acting with intention. They know what they want to create, and they direct their attention and energy toward that goal. This gives them a sense of clarity and purpose that is rare, especially in times of collective madness. But this doesn't mean that the 1% are rigid or inflexible in their thinking. On the contrary, they are highly adaptable. They understand, as Pessoa did, that reality is fluid, and that their own perceptions and beliefs must be flexible in order to navigate this fluidity. They are able to shift perspectives, to question their own assumptions, and to remain open to new possibilities. This adaptability is what allows them to thrive even in the midst of chaos. Ultimately, this is what separates the 1% from the masses during times of mass psychosis. They are creators of reality, not passive recipients of it. They understand that reality is not fixed, it is shaped by our thoughts, our beliefs, and our attention. And they use this understanding to shape a reality that is aligned with their own truth, rather than being swept up in the collective delusion. This is the true power of Pessoa's secret. It is not just a way to escape the madness of the world, it is a way to master it. By cultivating mental flexibility, emotional detachment, and internal sovereignty, you can begin to shape your own reality rather than being shaped by the collective psychosis of society. This is the philosopher's weapon, and it is available to anyone who is willing to take control of their own mind.